Okay, so hi if you're with me. First of all, if you can hear my house's fire detector, I know it's like a common joke, like oh black people's house it always goes off. Well, our ceilings are really freaking high, so it is what it is. Um, I think it's been going off in some of my episodes, and I haven't really been aware of it. But again, like I said, it is what it is. If I can find a way to take it out post, I actually probably won't, to be honest with you, because I'm not listening to this whole thing again. However, if you're here, thank you for being here. Today is going to be a very long episode. I think we're going to be talking about the houses, but like kind of in a chill way because I feel like I'm kind of in a chill mood. But I have three tabs open right now. They're all mine, which is kind of a weird feeling because I read my stuff, I write my stuff, and I go away. But I wrote a big guide to all 12 houses, and then I wrote a separate thing about the sixth house, and then a whole separate thing about the 12th house, and I posted them, and I'm just kind of feeling like it is kind of like one episode, and just there's a lot that I want to go over and talk about. Um, so that's what today's going to be. And like I said, I want to do it chill, not like some version where I have like this thesis and I'm building up to it, and there's like this big turn at a certain time frame. But I just want to talk about like how the houses actually work. Um, I want to talk about how the houses actually work all the way down, and kind of like sit with two that I think are the most useful and honestly kind of the most badly explained, the 6th and 12th house. But chill doesn't mean shallow, so I'm gonna be explaining the whole thing, where each piece came from, why it matters, what it means, and what it does when you put it next to the other pieces. Because I feel like I've set through a lot of astrology content that will hand you a definition and then just move on, like you're supposed to nod. And I always have the question of, okay, but why? Where did you get that? Like, who says what you're saying? So I'm going to say who and why as we go. So, like I said, get comfortable, do something with your hands, go do some laundry, whatever. This one is long and you can absolutely wander off and come back. And actually, on to that, because I knew this is one that was going to run for a while. So I kind of made y'all a thing. It's 6 pages and it is free 99. It's called The Houses But Chill, same as the episode, and it's basically this whole episode on paper. All three clocks, all 12 rooms with their dates, the six pairs, the sixth and the 12th, and then the last page are the two questions I'm going to inquire about, you guys, at the end with actual lines to write on. So, if you're the kind of person who wants to follow along and take notes, I would go grab that now. If you're driving, please get it later. It's not going anywhere. It lives in my resource vault, and the link will be in the show notes. It's not something you need. I'm going to end up saying every word of it out loud throughout this episode, but I do think it's nice to have the 12 houses on one page instead of trying to like hold them in your head while you're maybe folding laundry. So, anyway, let's go. All right. So a birth chart has three moving parts. And I want to do these properly because if you ever get these three down, then you kind of have the grammar of like the entire thing. And I don't think anything after this would confuse you. I could be wrong, but let's just go. So the three are planets, signs, and houses. And here's the part that almost nobody ever tells you, that those three come from three completely different places. The planet, signs, and houses are actually not three flavors of the same idea. Instead, they're three separate observations made by different people over a very long time that eventually got stacked on top of each other. So I'm going to do one at a time. Planets. So our planets are our actual objects, you guys. This is the most literal part of the whole system, and the part that I think is treated as the most mystical, which is kind of backwards. So a planet is a thing that moves in the sky. That's really the whole definition, and it's where the word comes from, wanderer, because it means the thing that does not stay put. Because if you ever look up on any clear night, almost everything will hold its position relative to everything else, right? The stars, they stay in their patterns. And then there are a handful of bright points that will drift, and this is astronomy we're talking about, not even really astrology, astronomy. Night after night, week after week, these planets, they move against a fixed background. So people tracked them for thousands of years, sometimes with no instruments, just watching and writing it down, and they got extremely good at it. Good enough to predict where those points would be years in advance. And when you've been watching seven things moving for that long, you're going to start to notice that each one behaves differently. Mars is a planet that moves fast and is red. Saturn is the slowest one you can see with your eyes, and it takes about 29 years to get all the way around. So that's why we call it the outer edge of what a person can watch in a lifetime. Mercury, it never gets far from the sun, and it flickers just in and out of visibility. So those behaviors are where the meaning started. They didn't come out of nowhere. They came from the actual behavior of the actual object. So Saturn means time and limit, partially because Saturn is a slow one at the boundary of what you can see. Mercury, it actually means the quick and slippery thing, partially because Mercury genuinely is the quick and slippery thing. So I'm not saying that that's proof, but I'm saying the meanings did not just get pulled out of someone's behind. They got built on top of centuries of somebody watching the same points do the same thing. So, planets are the moving parts in a chart. We're going to call them the verb. They are the doing. Now let's talk about signs, because signs come from the year. So signs are a completely different observation and a completely different clock. The sun, it takes a full year to make its full circuit, right? And people divided that circuit into 12. And I want to be very careful about why 12, because I think the honest answer is kind of like a mix of things. So first of all, 12 divides nicely. There are roughly 12 moon cycles in a year, and the sky already gets red in 12 pretty naturally. But here's what I think the signs actually are. And this is kind of the whole thing the show is like built on, my brand, my everything here. My way of, like, not even my brand, my way of viewing astrology. Like, this is my Jacala's way. Humans lived inside the same year, over and over for a very long time. And every stretch of that year feels different. Not because somebody decided it should, but because the light changes, the temperature changes, what is happening outside changes, and what a person is required to do changes with it. Like, for instance, late October is a very specific experience. It just is. This is the time of the year where the light's going. Things are closing down. There's a particular quality to it that everybody who's lived through 40 of them recognizes. So over generations, people develop language for those phases, words for what that stretch of the year wants of you and what it feels like to be alive inside of it. That's what a sign is. It's a vocabulary for one phase of the solar cycle, which is why the signs' meanings track the seasons so cleanly when you look, when you check. That's not a coincidence, and it's not proof of anything supernatural. It's just what happens when you name something by watching it for thousands of years. So, if the planets are the doing, signs are the manner, the how, the flavor the doing arrives in. Now, let's get to the houses. Because houses come from the day. This is the third observation, the third clock, and it's the one that gets skipped, and I skipped for a long time while learning astrology. So, signs come from one full trip of the sun around the year. Houses come from one full rotation of the earth in a day, 24 hours. And in that 24 hours, the entire sky appears to wheel past you. Things rise in the east, they climb to the top, they set in the west, and it basically passes underneath. So that means that the sky gets divided by two lines that are purely local. The horizon, which is the literal line where the ground ends up meeting the sky at the exact point, the exact spot you were standing when you were born, and the meridian, which runs through the point directly over your head. Those two lines, they cross, and that gives you 4 quarters. When you chop each quarter into 3, you get 12 houses. It felt like a lot to get there, okay? But that's really what it is. And if you notice what those lines are made of, they are made of where you were and when. The horizon at my birth in Florida is a different line than the horizons at yours if it was like in Oklahoma or something. That's why the houses need a birth time and a birthplace, and signs do not. So the horizon moves about 15 degrees an hour, I believe. So if your birth time is off by even 2 hours, your moon is still in the same sign, no question, but your moon may be in a different room, and that's where the conversation can change. And here's what happens when you stack all 3, okay? When you stack all 3, so you have a moving object in a phase of the year. This is viewed from a specific spot on a spinning planet at a specific hour. Remember, the planet is the sign, house, what, how, where, and you can build an actual sentence out of it. So actually didn't like I don't think I put this down on the slides, but yes I did. Um, okay, so let's use Mars and Aries in the 10th house, for example, and I've broken them down on the slide. So Mars is the pushing, the initiating, the going after. Aries is how fast and how and direct and first and a little combative about it. The 10th house is your where. And the 10th is up at the top of the chart. The 10th house is the most publicly visible position in the whole wheel. So it is known as the career, reputation, the part of a life other people can see. When you put that together, this is a person who pushes, and they push hard and fast and first, and they do it right out where everybody is watching. Now, if we were to change one thing in this equation, let's keep their same Mars, let's keep their same Aries, but instead, let's put it in the 4th house, which is at the very bottom of the chart, where your chart talks about your private base, your home, and your family. So now all that same push is happening at home, privately, probably with somebody they live with. Nobody at the house maybe has any idea. You see how that goes from the identical planet, identical sign, completely different life? And that's why sign only astrology leaves people frustrated in a way we cannot articulate, because you have the what and the how, and you're missing the where. And the where it does an enormous amount of work. All right, so here's something that I wish someone knew to explain to me about astrology on day one. Okay, so your rising sign's not a personality trait. A lot of people, and even I, have talked about it for years like that, and I still kind of do sometimes. Like, it's a third personality bolted onto your sun and your moon, and like, fine, sure, it does describe how you show up, but structurally, that's not really what that is. It's almost more like a floor plan. So, let me explain why I said it like that. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry. Apologize. So remember the horizon I talked about? Like the local line where the sky meets the ground, and at that moment you were born, some specific degree of some specific sign was coming over that eastern horizon. Well, that is actually your rising sign. So at the moment you were born, some specific degree of some specific sign was coming up over that horizon sign. And so your rising sign ends up becoming your first house. And then after that, the other 11, they just kind of follow in order. So Aries rising, if you're an Aries rising, it means Aries is your first, Taurus is your second, Gemini is your third, straight around the wheel. And then, fourth is Cancer, fifth is Leo, sixth is Virgo. If you're a Scorpio rising, it means that Scorpio is your first, Sagittarius your second, Capricorn is your third, Aquarius is your fourth, Pisces is your fifth, Aries is your sixth, Taurus is your seventh, Gemini is your eighth, Cancer is your ninth, Leo is your 10th, Virgo is your 11th, and Pisces is your 12th. I think I did that math right. So same 12 signs, same 12 houses, totally different assignment of which sign is doing which job. Which, that is why two people can literally have the same planet at the same degree of the same sign, and it will mean something different for each of them because it's not landing in the same room. And I want to actually explain this on my own chart instead of just telling you to remember it for later, because I think that this is where most people's confusion lives, and I think I can get it cleared up in about 90 seconds. So let me try this, okay? So I'm a Virgo rising. Now Virgo is what everyone likes to call the natural sign of the 6th house. Natural, it just means basically like your default order, like your diagram in a textbook, the one you get before any actual human being is even involved. So Aries first, Taurus second, and on around, so Virgo lands 6. In Pisces, 12 signs in, it lands 12th. So you would reasonably assume that Virgo has something to do with my 6th house and Pisces with my 12th, but it doesn't. Not even slightly. Because I'm a Virgo rising, Virgo is my first house. Virgo's my front door. It's the first thing anybody meets when they meet me. And Pisces, sitting opposite, is actually my 7th in my relationships. So the two signs the textbook calls work and rest, in my actual chart, is more of self and other, for making any sense. And this does matter practically, because when something big happens in Virgo and Pisces, and there's a lunar eclipse, and exactly those two signs coming up at the end of August, everybody online is going to be saying how it should be about work and rest and burnout and routine. But for me, it's actually not. For me, it's about how I show up versus who I end up across from. And that's a totally different subject entirely. And this is why, like, surface level Instagram and Pinterest post may not resonate with you and may all feel like a whole bunch of jalopy, because it's not really being read correctly and not being really expressed, and people don't have the understanding that this doesn't necessarily apply to you in that same way. But same sky, 12 different sets of rooms depending on what was coming up over the horizon when each of us were born. You know, honestly, if I had any advice for anybody who, like, maybe there's a astrologer that you do like, and you want to know more about, like, why they may come to certain conclusions, honestly, throw, like, maybe the post you see into an AI chat with your birth chart. Like, don't have the AI chat look up your birth chart, because they don't always have access to, like, the full database to give you the accurate placements you need to have. Some of them can, and some of them work very, very well. But if you do use that way, check it and make sure that it's, like, reading your placements. And you can even ask it, like, list me down the placements that you're in my degrees, and make sure those add up with a actual astrology app that you may be using. But put that in with your birth chart and inquire of it from the advice that this, like, astrologer's post or whatever has put, and you're reading my chart. How would this advice actually fit in for me, and go from there. And then I think you'll end up learning a lot more about your astrology for you personally, because it can be a guide, and that's why I'm talking about it like this. But anyway, so that's what this is what a rising sign is actually for. I like to consider it more as not a vibe and more so like the assignment. So I have to mention this one, and I'm going to be relatively fast with it. So there's more than one way to actually chop a chart into 12 houses. There are more than a dozen ways, actually. And the two you'll actually run into, I think, the most are whole sign and Placidius, if I'm saying that right. So whole sign is the way to configure that does um it does it by sign. So one sign, one house, no exceptions. Virgo rising means all 30 degrees of Virgo in my first house. All 30 degrees of Libra. Sorry guys, I'm adjusting my mic. I'm actually, like, laying down while doing this. I'm having some down days, okay? Okay, so, like, let me live. But I'm, like, on the ground on my floor recording this and talking. Um, wow, this mic is insane. Cause I think you can hear my mom and my daughter. I think my mom and my daughter were talking to each other. I feel like I could use this mic to snoop on people, but that would be weird. And honestly, I don't care. I don't want to hear people's personal conversations, to be real with you. I have enough personal conversations in my own head. Anyway, so whole sign, like I said, it does it by sign, one house, no exceptions. Virgo rising, it means that all 30 degrees of Virgo sit in my first house, and all 30 degrees of Libra are in my second, and then it goes, like, around like that. Placidius, it does it by time. It takes up how long a given degree can take to climb from the horizon to the top of the sky, and it divides that up, which means the boundaries can land wherever the math puts them. So a house might start 11 degrees of Libra, but then it's going to run to Scorpio, and the wedges are going to come out uneven, and at higher latitudes they get really uneven because the sky's moving at a different angle up there. So Placidius is the default on basically every free chart site. So it may have been what, if you've been looking at your chart, what you've been looking at without ever knowing that you made that a choice. Now, I keep saying whole sign has clean edges, and I say it constantly. So let me actually say what I mean by it, because it's not me just liking tidy things. So an edge or a cusp, that is where one house stops and the next one starts. Every house system has to decide where to put those 12 lines, basically. And in whole house, every edge sits exactly at 0 degrees of a sign. So the boundary between your houses is also the boundary between the signs. They are the same line. One sign equals one house all the way around, and nothing ever straddles anything. And in Placidius, the edges, they land in the middle of the signs. So the sign boundaries and the house boundaries, they're two different sets of lines, of making any sense. They basically cross each other at random looking places, and one sign can get split across two houses while another sign gets swallowed entirely inside of one house with no cusp in it at all. And that's what I mean by clean edges. Not that it's prettier, but that the two grids line up perfectly instead of being offset. And I care about it for only really one reason, and it's kind of the entire thing I do here. Because if one house is on one whole sign, right, and one sign is a fixed run of weeks on the calendar, then one house is a fixed run of weeks on the calendar. And so the math is going to pass it straight through. But the second a sign gets split across two houses, that chain's going to break. You cannot put a house on a calendar anymore because the house is now part of one month and part of another. So that's it. That's really my whole reason. I'm not going to tell you Placidius is wrong. Placidius, I can never say it. But because that argument is roughly 2,000 years old and I ain't got it to do while you're probably doing the dishes, listening to me talk. But do know this, if two astrologers have told you different things about your own chart and you assumed one of them was bad at their job, this just generally might be all it was. They may be using different systems, different rooms, and both are probably being pretty honest. So yeah, so there we go. So this is a beautiful chart. I actually really love to look at this chart. We're gonna go through all 12. It's gonna kind of be a speed round. So if it feels like I'm brushing past them, I am. But I'm going to give you the natural sign order, meaning the default order I described earlier, and what that house covers, and briefly why it covers that. Because the order is not random, and once you start to see the logic, I think it's hard to forget. So the wheel starts with the rising with you, and it works outward. That's the pattern. It starts at the most personal thing, and then it widens. That's how a lot of astrology works. And astronomy, honestly. Well, actually, no, just astrology. All right, so first house is Aries. This is the body and the rival. This is literally the degree that was rising, so it is where you begin. How you come into the world before you have said anything. It is the most personal house there is because it's the point the whole chart is measured from. Your second house, Taurus. This is what's yours. Money, possessions, your own resources, and self-worth, which sits in here too. And I think this is one of the sharpest things in the whole system because it's the house of what you own is also the house of what you think you are worth. Those are things that get filed together pretty much on purpose. Then the third house is Gemini. This is the near world. This is siblings, neighbors, short trips, how you talk, how you text, the 10-mile radius. It is what's close enough to reach without actually changing your life. Fourth house is Cancer, and this is home, family, roots, the private base. This is the bottom of the chart, the point that was directly underneath you at birth, the part of the sky nobody could see, which is exactly why it means the private thing. Then we get to the fifth house, Leo, and Leo is what you make that is only yours. Creativity, play, romance, children. Coming out of the private base, this is the first thing you produce from it. And then we get to our sixth house, Virgo. This is the house of daily work. It's the work you do rather than the career you have. Routine, health, maintenance. We're going to come back to do this one properly. Seventh house is Libra. This is the other person, partnership, marriage, business, partners, and traditionally open enemies too, which I do think is funny and also very correct. This is the point directly opposite the first, the setting horizon. So it's literally like also referred to as the other side of you. Then we have our eighth house, which is Scorpio. This is what you share, what you lose, other people's money, debt, inheritance, intimacy, the things you don't have getting said at dinner. It follows the seventh because once there's another person, there's now a joint account. Ninth house, Sagittarius. This is the far world, higher education, long travel, publishing, belief. The third was what you can reach. This is what you have to go a distance for. 10th house, Capricorn. This is what you are 4 in public, your career, reputation, authority. This is the top of the chart, top of the morning to you. This is the highest point in the sky, the most visible position there is. Of course, it means the public one. Then we get to the 11th house, which is House of Aquarius. And this is our group, friends, networks, our collective projects, the future you actually want. This is past your reputation and out into everybody. And then 12th house is Pisces. This is what runs under all of it. Your solitude, rest, the unconscious, coming back to this one too. Right? We're talking about that one deeper. But do you see the shape of it? It's all about like, you got body, and then you got resources, then you got immediate surroundings, home, what you make, your daily upkeep, and then it crosses the horizon to 7th, and everything after that, it involves what other people, your partner, your shared resources, the wider world, your public role, the collective, and then the 12th, which is what's left when all of it dissolves. So it goes from the most personal thing to the least, and then back under. And one more note before we move on, because I think this is a very common mix-up that I've like made as well. So a sign is a quality, a house is a location. And what I mean by that is like Virgo is the natural sign of the 6th house, right? That does not mean Virgo is in your 6th house. Your 6th house has whatever sign is actually sitting there in your chart. And for 11 out of 12 of you, that's not Virgo. The natural pairing is just a teaching tool. This is not your chart, by the way. Just wanted to point that out. So here's another thing that actually took me embarrassingly long to notice I want to talk about too. The houses are not 12 separate topics. They're actually 6 pairs. I kind of hinted at it above when I was like talking about like Libras and like 7th. So every house has one sitting directly across the wheel from it. And when it sits across the wheel from it, it makes it 180 degrees away. And the two of them are sitting in the same subject, but they're asking the same thing from opposite ends. 1 and 7 is how you arrive against who you keep meeting. 2 and 8, which is Taurus. So, okay, 1 and 7. 1 is Aries, 7 is Libra. 2 is Taurus, and 8 is Scorpio. So that's what is yours versus what is shared or lost. And then you got 3 and 9, which is Gemini and Sagittarius. So you have the near world against the far one. And then you have 4 and 10, which is Cancer and Capricorn. So you have your private base against your public position. Then you have 5 and 11, what you make alone against what you built with everybody. That's Leo and Aquarius. And you have 6 and 12, your daily work against what runs underneath. And we've been talking about it. Again, that's Virgo and Pisces. So once you've read them in pairs, the meanings, they get so much sharper. Because the single house on its own is honestly a little vague list of nouns. But I find that when you put the pair together, it actually becomes more of an argument. Because see, 4 and 10 is not home and career sitting there as 2 separate facts. It's one question. How much of you is allowed to be private and how much of you has to be visible? And where do you set that line? And what happens when the two sides want different amounts? See, that's a real question about a real life. And you only get it by looking at both ends, which brings me to the last pair. And that is where I want to spend the rest of this. 6 and 12, because it's the one that has changed how I think about my own life the most. And it's the one that I do kind of think is also explained the worst. But quick breath, because this is kind of the halfway point, and I may actually end this one on that one. I don't know. Actually, I may want to talk about the 6. No, actually, I think this part I will end on this one and take like a little break and come back. What else I got to do? I'm off today. Even though I do need to find some hours to pick up because I called out a lot on Sunday. Did I only call? Yeah, I think I called out only on Sunday. In my job, I have to make up any hours we call out for. We like pick our schedules, and now I'm like losing where my notes were. But anyway. Who cares? I don't need my notes. Actually, like I know what we're talking about. But since we're kind of like at the halfway point, everything I've said so far, the 3 o'clocks, the rising sign, the 12 rooms with their dates, the 6 pairs, all of that, is basically pages 1 through 4 of the free thing I mentioned at the top. So if any of it went past you, or if you want it in front of you instead of just in your ears, that's where it is. The Houses But Chill, 6 pages. They're in my resource vault. Link in the show notes. And page 5 is the 6th and the 12th, which is going to be the next part that we're going to talk about. But for this part, we're going to stop. So this is going to be part 1 for the houses.